Welcome, everybody coming in. We are kicking off week 17, championship week in fantasy football. As always, I am Luke Reimer. This is Flurry Sports. I am here to help kick off the week of our fantasy football content this week coming. With that being said, I'm here to answer any championship questions. I'm here to help set a lineup. I'm here to help set your lineup. I'm here to, start, sit, whatever you want. We're here to talk about it. So let's start with something a little easy. Let's just go over the schedule here real quick. I'm gonna pull it up. So looking, I guess I can share the screen with you guys. There we go. I guess I could have did this before the show, but that's okay. We're here. Looking at the week. So we start off Thursday, Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. Cowboys, Commanders, Lions, Vikings, Broncos, Chiefs. Three games that are going to feature some options at quarterback. I get. We'll just start off with quarterback. Josh Johnson going against the Cowboys. If you're someone who's ridden Jaden Daniels all year and then pivoted to Marcus Mariota, I think you can once again pivot to Josh Johnson. I mean, he's been in the league forever. Um, we've seen what quarterbacks can do against the Cowboys. I mean, look at Justin Herbert last week, 300 passing yards. Now, Josh Johnson's not going to come out and throw for 300 yards, but he's going to come out. He's going to use his legs like he always does. We're in the Cliff Kingsbury offense, so the quarterback um, running is going to be part of this offense. Um, for what it's worth, the Cowboys have played well at working on the inside run. Once you get to the outside and once you start passing, there's not much that they've been able to show that's been like, wow, I'm really scared of that. So while it's not very sexy, and you're probably not going to start Josh Johnson in your championship, which I totally understand, I think that certainly the matchup is there for him to succeed if you're in a pinch, right? This is probably a game where Washington gets down to, right? So they're probably playing from behind. Again, I don't expect much out of this Washington run game. So I think passing alone, I think Josh Johnson probably got a floor of 13 to 15 points. Like if you need something safe, and I know it's weird to say that if you need something safe with the first game of the week, but really if you need something safe, like Josh Johnson is not the worst option this week. Moving on to, and I see some people coming in. Any questions you have, please drop them. I'm here to answer all and any and all questions. We're here to talk some ball. Lions, Vikings. So the big fantasy thing in my mind with the Lions and Vikings, the Vikings especially, is they've been good against outside receivers, but they've been good. I think they're 32nd in yards or in fantasy points given up to receivers. Like they've been tough to pass on. But so does that? I think that probably discredits Jameson Williams a little bit more. Amon-Ra St. Brown would be fine. He'd be working underneath. He's as big of a goal line threat as almost as Jameer Gibbs is. The Lions are definitely, in line for a bounce back game here. They're in a must-win game here. You're not sitting Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams is up for debate. He's about a flex to me. I think he's a little bit lower than a wide receiver two this week. But again, this they need to win this game. They're going to get the ball. They're studs. Minnesota's really got nothing to play for. So I do think both register for a good day. I think Jameson Williams probably sees about 6 catches. No, probably 4 to 6 catches. And then I guess whatever Jameson Williams gets, right, he can either go for 40 or go for, feels like 120. It feels kind of in that 65 range and hopefully a touchdown. Like I'm not expecting him to win my week, but I'm not expecting him to lose my week. In terms of Vikings receivers, it's hard to say that anything is moving, with the kind of pace that we wanted to with Max Brosmer starting this week. Um, it's weird to say, but it feels like it's been a downgraded quarterback right now. JJ McCarthy has been good as of recent, but if we're taking the overall sample size for the whole season, it's hard to say that he's been the one to really roll with this offense. So moving forward, I think you're valuing Justin Jefferson as whatever you've been valuing him as throughout the season. Like I don't think he's getting any better. I don't think he's getting any worse. Is it a situation where you bring in a young quarterback and it's just feed your top guy the entire game, get him going, get him healthy? That's what I've been thought throughout the year with JJ McCarthy. That obviously hasn't rang true. But if you somehow made the championship with Justin Jefferson, first off, congratulations. But to me, it's probably a flex play. Like it's similar to Jameson Williams in my mind. We just haven't seen anything out of Jefferson. Now, the one thing that's pushing back in my head of like, hey, you have to start, Justin Jefferson is, you drafted him first round. We know that Justin Jefferson can go for 115, two touchdowns in any given week. If you sit that in the championship, you're going to feel like a dumbass. But given what we've seen this season, it's hard to really have, as strong of trust in Justin Jefferson as we probably should at this point in the season, right? So again, wide receiver two flex range for me for Justin Jefferson. That running back situation is really interesting. I think Xavier Scott is definitely worth a look at. I think he's a flex. I think he's a play this week. We saw the Lions give up a ton of points to the Steelers running backs last week, with Jalen Warren hitting two long runs and Kenneth Gainwell working well in the pass game. I think Scott's more right. He's probably more involved in the pass game, especially with Brosmer at quarterback. It feels like if Jefferson is not there, it's a lot of dump downs and let Scott do the work. I think the injuries in that backfield are significant enough to where Scott is going to be put into a much bigger role than we thought he would have coming into this week. So if you're rolling with an Aaron Jones or a Jordan Mason, I think Xavier Scott is it's a very worthwhile pivot option here. Broncos Chiefs, I don't like anything for the Chiefs with Rashee Rice out. I guess that probably boosts up Xavier Worthy a little bit, but with the uncertainty that they have a quarterback, it's really hard to say that you're going to be confident with Xavier Worthy starting in probably your flex spot. So I'm staying away from the Chiefs, especially against that Broncos defense. And for the Broncos, I think you're full go on the Broncos. If you've been starting, Cortland Sutton has been working. I think Troy Franklin's actually, coming back to what we wanted him to be. I think he's definitely worth a start this week. He's probably in the same level as that Jameson Williams, Justin Jefferson, maybe a tad below, but in that same neighborhood as what I'm ranking. And people in the people watching, please leave some questions in the chat. Helps me keep this show moving. I appreciate everybody watching. Saturday, Texans Chargers. I'm discrediting the Chargers, right? That Houston defense is scary. It's gonna be a really fun game. I hope it's really fun. I'm really discounting the Chargers this week. I as much as I love Justin Herbert as a quarterback, I hate him in fantasy football this week. For if you're looking at him, if you're riding on him for a championship, that Chargers offensive line is still banged up. It's still it's still not great. We saw him take a couple big hits against Dallas last week. With Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter coming off the edge, it's going to be hard for Justin Herbert to really drop back and be able to weigh all his options the entire game. On top of that secondary that the Texans have is scary, man. Like I think the Texans win this game. I think this Texans defense is good enough to bring them to the Super Bowl. I don't know, like Quentin Johnson, I'm out on this week. Keenan Allen, if you're starting for whatever reason, I'm out. Lab McConkey, I think, he's probably my top pass catcher out of those three. But again, take that with a grain of salt because that's going to come with checkdowns, come with quick routes. So it feels like it's a lot more run after the catch kind of thing, as opposed to Herbert throwing him open. And then the last game on Saturday, Ravens Packers, kind of a very different game than we once had thought. Right, this coming from a Packer fan. We're all excited for the Jordan Love Lamar Jackson matchup. Now, do either of them play? I don't know. I imagine they both probably push to play, considering that this is, we kind of need to win this game more so for the Ravens, but we kind of need to win this game for postseason reasons. So I think. I think Jordan Love's worth, a look at if he's healthy. The Ravens defense has been better, but I think you still can, throw on them a little bit. In terms of the Packers defense, right? They lost a lot with the Micah Parsons. They lost a lot with Devontae Wyatt being out. I it's been really hard to confidently start Lamar Jackson this year. It's been really hard to confidently start anyone against the Packers defense this year. But last week we saw Caleb Williams come away with a good game. I know that kind of helped the 46-yard touchdown at the end of the game really pushed him forward to having an all right fantasy day. But again, I'm valuing both these quarterbacks if they play as kind of that quarterback two territory. It's two, defenses who feels like both of them are their backs are up against the wall, and who are going to be playing hungry. I do like Derrick Henry in this game. If we don't have a Lamar Jackson, if we have Snoop Huntley playing, we saw Derrick Henry, kind of work very well against the Patriots defense, who was, on who were playing very well against, running backs throughout the middle part of the season. I think, this is Packers are a defense that you can run us, especially without, Devontae Wyatt. I think Derrick Henry probably has the most fantasy significance out of every player in this game this week. So if you made it to the fantasy championship, I don't think you're worried about Derrick Henry. Randy in the chat, welcome, Randy. Happy holidays. It's good to see you. Appreciate you always being here. Do you think the Ravens need a new coach next year? I don't. I'm a big John Harbaugh fan. I think Lamar Jackson's injuries, on top of a bad offensive line, on top of defensive injuries, have really limited their potential this year. I think the Ravens are fine next year. Another good game here that we probably didn't think was going to be good. Seahawks Panthers. That's an interesting one. Again, it's both where both don't necessarily have to win, but both would like to win for postseason standings. I think probably the Seahawks come away with it in this one. Panthers are a really good coach. Is a really good coach team. I totally understand why they are atop atop the NFC South. While it's not a great division, I mean, the Panthers have done what they can to win it, and they are staking their claim there. I am not, if for whatever reason you're in a two quarterback league, I think if you can pivot away from Bryce Young, I know he's had a good week here and there. This end of the season, that Seahawks defense is legit. It's fast. It's big. It's fast, and that is really not Bryce Young's mo. I think Seahawks really get him moving on the run, and I think maybe contrary to popular belief, I think Bryce Young's probably a little bit better pocket passer. Although he is small to do it, but a bit of pocket passer than he is on, creating plays on his own. The Seattle's defense is very formidable. I also think Seattle can run the ball really well on Carolina. So I think you're loading up Ken Walker again. I think you're loading up both Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who ran well against a good Rams defense last week. Why did the Seahawks get away from that? I'm not sure. I think both, right as I said, both Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are plays this week. I guess the only, you probably loading up Rico Dowdle. The only take, if like Ted McMillan, you probably have to play Ted McMillan. If you can pivot from it, I would be interested in that conversation of who you would pivot to. But I'm not totally out on, not starting Ted McMillan in the championship here. And that brings me to my next point about, building your bench for the championship. You do not need anyone that's not going to play. You don't need anyone who's out. You don't need anyone who's on IR. You don't need anyone who's questionable and maybe they're on a limited snap count. You don't need any of that. Take a look at your fantasy football league's tiebreakers. Now I know this is probably Luke, this is stupid. Why do you even talk about tiebreakers? It's never going to happen. I agree. I've seen it the last couple of weeks though, and actually in a league or two that I'm in, where it has come down to a tiebreaker. And the question is, what is a tiebreaker? I The most popular response that I've heard to that question is bench points. So if you load your bench up with quarterbacks, if you load your bench up with kickers, if you load your bench up with guaranteed points, that helps to break a tiebreaker. Again, look at what your tiebreaker is. If it's anything else, then this is probably not for you. But again, bench points, you don't need guys who are out. You don't need guys who are on IR. You don't need guys who, obviously, unless you're in a sleeper or dynasty league, you don't need, or a sleeper, a keeper league or a dynasty league. You don't need anyone who's not going to score points this week. I think bench points are fine. I know it's always bittersweet to have bench points, but I think at this point, if that tiebreaker is in play, that is something that you need to consider in your championship here. Cardinals Bengals. We saw. I was big on Michael Carter this week. He didn't give you the fantasy performance you're looking for. I think you can ride him again against a bad Bengals defense. Trey McBride is definitely, if you have Trey McBride, you're playing Trey McBride. But Trey McBride is definitely one that is going to be heavily utilized, especially given that he didn't get into the end zone last week. That Bengals defense is, historically horrendous against against tight end against the tight end position. So low Trey McBride, of course, this week. I think Michael Carter's fine again this week. Again, Bengals are not great against the run. They're not great anywhere else. And I think I think that whole Cardinals offense is fine. We saw them register a good day in that tough matchup last week, but I think if you're riding Jacoby Brissett, he's gotten you here for a reason. Jacoby Brissett's a good play. Michael Wilson's a good play. Marvin Harrison's a good play. It's obvious that both can coexist together. I think Marvin Harrison, Michael Carter, Michael Wilson are all flex plays. Steelers Browns. Steelers continue to do what they do and just be the awesome, 500 team. Browns running back situation is really interesting, right? We saw Quinshawn Judkins go down with a horrible injury. I hope it's nothing too serious. No, he's not a great person, but he's a great running back. I know that's probably not very moralic of me to say, but whatever. Um, so that feels like it vaults Dylan Sampson up to that running back one work where everyone seems to be on. I don't necessarily know if that's the case. He's dealing with I think a hand and a calf injury that is coming back from. I don't think that we see Dylan Sampson coming in work 25 carries in this game, right? I think he's probably the running back to own in this offense. But Raheem Sanders is there, who gets a lot of work in the pass game. He's a good pass blocker. And given that the Steelers are still we kind of still need to win this game. I think Steelers go up in this game, and I think the Browns may be playing from behind. Um, which we've seen, Shadur Sanders not shy away from taking that check down, letting plays develop, and then taking, the check down at the last second. So I think Raheem Sanders is definitely worth a pickup, just to not let anyone else pick him up. I don't know if he's worth a start. And for me, Pittsburgh played well against that Detroit strong run game last week. Jahmyr Gibbs did get in the end zone, but that was on a pass, which I guess kind of plays into Sanders' work. But and Steelers have been playing well against the run lately. I don't think you're starting either of these Browns running backs with confidence. They're both a tick below, flex value for me. Maybe an RB3 to RB4 territory. Jaguars Colts. So the one takeaway that I got from that, well, more than one, but a takeaway that I got from that Colts 49ers game on Monday night was that the Colts struggled against underneath routes, underneath and tight end positions. That screams Brenton Strange and Travis Etienne to me. Like, I know Travis Etienne is not Christian McCaffrey, but why can't he play the same exact role that Christian McCaffrey played last week? Um, Colts Colts linebackers are slow, not slow, but relative are slow. And it's going to be a tough cover with ETN and Strange both this week. I think you fire them both up. You fire them both up with confidence. ETN's probably an RB2 for me, and Strange is obviously a tight end one. As for the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, you're obviously starting him. I'm just going through the guys in my mind that have some sort of fantasy relevance. Jaguars you can pass on. They create a lot of turnovers, but they give up a lot of yards. So I think your Colts pass catchers are good to go. I think this is probably a game where Tyler Warren might get going a little bit. We did see it last week. He was involved a little bit more than he has been the last couple of weeks. But I don't think Philip Rivers has that tough of a time working, working those wide receivers with the Michael Pittmans and the Josh Downs and the Alec Pierce. I think Alec Pierce is probably my favorite. I think he's always feels like he's always the number one guy who can score a touchdown just given his long playability. And that Philip Rivers is actually throwing the ball within 30 yards. So I think Alec Pierce is probably a tick below that Jameson Williams territory, but definitely worth a flex play, a wide receiver 3 flex play for me. Buccaneers Dolphins. Dolphins defense has been much better than it had been to start the year, especially against the run. Um, this is a game where you're starting Mike Evans because I don't think that pass game is nearly as good as the run defense has been for the Dolphins. You're starting Mike Evans. We know that, right, Tampa's also in a must-win situation. Get the ball to the studs. We saw that 2 weeks ago, even though they lost the game, that Mike Evans comes back and they immediately throw him 5 for 130 or whatever he had, 136 yards. So I think Mike Evans is a fine play this week. I think that I'm not starting Emeka Egbuka with confidence. I don't think He's probably similar to Jameson Williams. It's nice that we talk about Jameson Williams right away because it feels like that's my threshold this week. But I think Jameson Williams is feels like a flex play to me this week. I think Chris Godwin's probably a tick below that. You're not starting Kate Otten, and I think you're loading up Bucky Irving. You held on to him too long. If you made the championship, congratulations. Kind of similar to Jefferson. I actually had a league where I drafted Jefferson and Irving. Now that I'm thinking back about it, that was probably the reason that I did not make the playoffs or did not make a championship. But if you made the championship with Bucky Irving, maybe work the trade in the middle of the season. This is the reason, right? You didn't hold on to him to sit him in the final week. So you're playing Bucky Irving, and of course you're playing Devon Achane. Let me scroll down here. Patriots, Jets. If you have Drake May, it should be like I think Drake May probably finishes with QB1 numbers this week in all fantasy football. Drake May, like right, we saw Trevor Lawrence go for 6 touchdowns, 6 combined touchdowns against the Jets last week, or 2 weeks ago. I'm just pulling up. Give me 1 second here. Um, Sorry, I'm just pulling up the Jets schedule real quick. And we saw Trevor Lawrence dominated, against him recently. And we saw Tyler Shuck and both Taysom Hill. I know Taysom Hill only attempted one pass, which kind of takes away from Tyler Shuck, but Shuck threw for 308 yards and a touchdown, also running for 8 yards. So, but 300 yards, like this Jets defense can be passed all over, especially without, um, the Patriots run offense kind of, took a boot with Travion Henderson being hurt, which Roger Stevens did a lock and load plays in RB2 for me this week. Um, that makes me think that it's a little bit more geared towards short passes, if they get into those situations that a Travion Henderson would fill. And I think Drake May probably runs a little bit in this game. Now, I know he's probably not going to run, enough to where fantasy relevance is really that big, but that doesn't exclude a touchdown. We've seen Drake May, work in the goal line situations for touchdowns. Jets have no significance. If you're in the championship, you probably don't have a Jet on your team. You're not starting any Jets. Set all your Jets if you are in the championship. Saints, Titans, another one. Tyler Shuck is he's I think he has the most wins out of the rookie quarterbacks this year. Like, he's another guy. Like I talked about it with Bo Nix. Like people just immediately wrote them off as horrible players when they got drafted. Tyler Shuck's not a horrible player. He had 308 yards and a touchdown last week against the Jets. He gets another bad defense with the Titans. I think if your back's up against the wall and you have quarterbacks, maybe you have a Lamar Jackson, who's not going to play, or you have a Jordan Love who's not going to play, and you really need a Hail Mary play. Tyler Shuck's fine. I don't necessarily know that he throws for 308 yards. I think Titans defense is a little bit better than the Jets, but I don't know how much better it is. Like 250 and 2 touchdowns from Tyler Shuck in my mind is not anything crazy. I think you can get away with starting Tyler Shuck in the championship, and if you do start Tyler Shuck in the championship, and win, imagine that's just to drop your nuts on the table, give a big middle finger to your opponent, and say, "Hey, I'm just better than you." As I see some people coming in here, please leave your questions. Any start sit questions, any final thoughts you have before the championship starts. Let me know. I'm here to answer them. I'm here to help you out. Um, let's all win some money this week. I'm in a couple of championships myself. I'm in a guillotine championship. I'm in a touchdown only league championship, which I've been working hard at getting to, and then I'm in a two week championship. So I guess not a normal, it's a dynasty, 2 week dynasty. So I guess I'm not in a normal redraft, normal, half point PPR redraft. But we move. It'll be fun last week of the season. Giants Raiders. I don't know if necessarily know that there's much fantasy value. I think Jackson Dart is fine. I guess now that I'm thinking this out, I think Wandale Robinson and Jackson Dart are fine. If you're starting either of them, I think Jackson Dart obviously has a huge bounce back game relative to what he had last week. Um, Raiders defense kind of played well against that Texans offense, but that Texans offense is so scatterbrained. It's really hard to predict what's coming. They didn't have much of a run game. I think the Giants can run the ball in this game with Tyrone Tracy, and I think Jackson Dart can kind of play off of that. Um, Anyone for the Raiders, you're loading up Brock Bowers, of course, but other than that, there's nothing really going this week for the Raiders. Eagles Bills, it'll be a fun game. I think this is kind of what the schedule makers had envisioned. Um, I guess the Eagles have the division locked up, so we'll see how much they play. I don't, it's hard to rest your starters for 2 weeks. We're gonna get run from Jalen Hurts, we're gonna run from Saquon Barkley. Dallas Goedert is a sit this week for me. Buffalo's been awesome against tight ends. I know Dallas Goedert has probably helped get you to the championship if you have him. But if you can pivot and go somewhere else, I think that's the route to go. I'm going to say the same thing about the Bills tight ends with Dalton Kincaid, who I think is droppable, and Dawson Knox. The Eagles, their linebackers are big and fast. They cover tight ends very well. They've been doing well against the run game. Now, that doesn't mean that James Cook, he's been, top three running back in fantasy football this year. You're loading up James Cook. Again, I think you're loading up Saquon Barkley too. I also think you're loading up AJ Brown and Devontae Smith if you have them. If you have them both, I like AJ Brown more than I like Devontae Smith. But for the Bills, the only two players that I think are worth a start. You're not sitting Josh Allen and you're not sitting James Cook. That Eagles defense has played well, given their recent struggles. Um, but if the Eagles are able to take away that tight end game, which I think that they can, I think we see a little bit of running from Josh Allen in this one, right? He put up a stinker last week. Hopefully, that didn't hurt your chances to making the championship. If you did win in spite of Josh Allen, congratulations. But if that tight end's taken away, that's a big part of Josh Allen's game that's taken away that he's probably going to have to make up for his legs. We've seen Josh Allen dominate on the ground come the end of the season and come playoff time. So I think Josh Allen is a fine week this week. Bears Niners is a really interesting one. Um, you're loading up Christian McCaffrey, of course. George Kittle's an interesting one. If he doesn't play, I don't hate Jake Tonjes for a play this week. We saw him in relief of George Kittle to start the year. I think he has 4 touchdowns on the year. Juwan Jennings is going to be a mainstay. He's Brock Purdy's number one option. I think Brock Purdy has a little bit lesser of a week against somewhat of a better. Well, I guess Chicago you can pass on. I think Brock Purdy's fine. If Brock Purdy got you the championship, I think that Bears defense is probably on the same level as that Indianapolis Colts defense. Championship game. I know it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm really excited to start Brock Purdy, but if you have nowhere else to go, I don't think you should feel too bad about that. I'm discounting the Bears running back room. DeAndre Swift is, he came in with a groin injury. I guess he looked fine against the Packers, but that run game was, the Green Bay played well against that run game. Um, 49ers played really well against Jonathan Taylor last week. I know he snuck in for a touchdown towards the end of the game. But I think it was 30 rushing yards through the first 3 quarters. Like San Francisco, given that, they lost a ton of players and Fred Warner and I guess Nick Bosa are two of the big names that they lost in defense. That young defense is fast. They're playing with their heads cut off. Um, Rob Sala is back for defense coordinator who's been, who's performed well stopping the run in his career. So I'm just like, it feels like both running back. It feels like maybe DeAndre Swift is a low end flex play, whereas Kyle Monangai is a running back 3-ish kind of player in my mind. No, we're running out. I'm getting out of here after this game. I appreciate everyone, jumping in, Randy. I appreciate you as always. Rams Falcons. You're loading up you're loading up your Falcon or you're loading up your Rams, whether it be Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, who's obviously very involved. I don't think he scores a touchdown this week. I'm going to continue to roll with Kyron Williams. Matt Stafford, you're loading up. Puka, you're loading up. Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen. It's at this point it's very unpredictable about who's going to be the guy. Obviously, Colby Parkinson wasn't the guy last week, and Atlanta, for as bad as they've had for a season 6-9, has played really well against tight ends. So I think either of them, what does one catch a touchdown? Probably. How are you going to predict that? I don't know. So I think you sit them both just to save yourself the headache and try to pivot somewhere else. In terms of Falcons receivers, tight ends, Bijan, you're obviously starting. I think Kyle Pitts is all right as a tight end to play this week. It seems like he's become the favorite target of Kirk Cousins since Cousins has kind of gotten into his groove in Atlanta and has been rolling a little bit. Um, Drake London, yeah, is probably a wide receiver 2 for me this week. Kyle Pitts is a tight end. And then other than that, Bijan Robinson's fine. Like if you're in a really deep league, like Tyler Algier is fine. But there's nothing like it's if you gun put in my head Monday night, feels like it comes down to who has Matthew Stafford, who has Puka, and who has Bijan Robinson on your team. With that being said, I appreciate everyone hanging out. It was just a quick rundown, quick thoughts of some fantasy relevant players that there might be questions on coming into a championship week. We will be back. We'll see when we'll be back. We're kind of in a weird schedule with Christmas on Thursday. With that being said, thank you everyone. Enjoy the night. Enjoy your holidays, and let's